There are plenty of inputs that have been added in with HTML5. These are just a handful of them, and I have the cheat sheet that has a whole bunch more. Let's take a look at a couple of other HTML elements that we have outside of input that create some other input types inside of our form. For example, we have the ability to add in a drop-down menu. So inside of a label, I'm going to call this state, add a break tag. And then on the next line, I can create, instead of an input, we're going to use the select tag. The select tag will create a drop-down. Inside of the select, we can create an option like so, and we could set this to New York. And then you can see over here that we get the option of New York inside of our drop-down. In the case of a drop-down menu, we still do need a few attributes. We don't need to specify type in this case because this isn't an input, it's a select, so we know the type of behavior that we're expecting. We don't need to worry about type, but we still do need to include a name. So I'm going to add in a name over here, and I'm going to set this equal to state so that should the user select this option, we know exactly that this data is going to be called state in the backend. The other thing that we need is a value. New York is a label inside of this option. So what we need is a value, and that value is what will be passed to our backend. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the abbreviation for New York. So the user will select New York, but the data that will be passed to the backend will be NY. So if I clone this, we could create a couple more options. So let's do tri-state area. So this is New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. As you can see, I have New York 3 times. So let's go change these labels. So this will be New Jersey, and this will be Connecticut. Now you can see I have my 3 options. If the user were to select Connecticut, for example, the data that would be passed to the backend would be CT. If they selected New Jersey, then the data that would be passed back is NJ. And if they selected New York, the data that would be passed back is NY. Everything up to this point, up to the point of the dropdown, has been an input. This is one of the few cases where we're creating an input field and we're not using the input tag. The last one that we're going to go over also doesn't use an input tag, and that is the text area. And text area is where we can store more than just one sentence of data. So over here, I'm going to start off. Here's the message for our web form. Let me bring this up, and let's create a text area. And here we go. That creates our text area. Now, similar to the dropdown, here we don't need to specify a type. The tag name is determining the behavior of this type of input. Similar to the dropdown, is we do need a name attribute. So we'll type in MSG over here, short for message. And if we want a placeholder, we can say over here, type message, ... and then that will appear as the placeholder text inside of our text area. So we've created a form. This form has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces of data that we are collecting from the end user. We have the name field, we have the email, telephone, password, gender, reply through, state dropdown, and a message. When the user is done with this form, they can hit the send button down here, and then that will submit the data. And then we will still need to build out the backend to control what happens to that data once it's submitted. With a form, the form has a bunch of attributes that we use in order to configure this correctly. The type indicates the behavior. There's a big difference between the type equaling text and the type equaling submit, for example. We want to make sure that there is a name in each one of our form inputs so that this way, when the data is passed to the backend, we know what to do with it. When it comes to text inputs or inputs that are similar to text inputs, like text, email, telephone, and password, we don't need to worry about the value attribute. The user will fill that in, and then whatever data they enter into those fields becomes the value. When it comes to the submit button, the value is the text that appears inside of this button. So here it says send, so that's why it says send inside of this button. And when we are talking about form inputs that are limiting options to the end user, where they can't just enter in whatever they want, we have a predetermined set of options for them. So for instance, gender, they could either select M, F, or N. For the checkboxes, they could select any combination of tel or email. In these cases, we need to determine what the value of those limited options are. So in the radio inputs, we have value M, value F, value N. In the case of the checkbox, we have value tel, value email. And in the case of our dropdown over here, we have the options of NY, NJ, and CT. In these cases where we are providing a limited set of options, we are providing what those values are when a user selects any of those options. We know what value to send to the backend. We also have the ability to set whether or not a field is required just by adding a required attribute. And we have the ability to add in placeholder text to give little tips to the end user about what type of data we're expecting. So the end user can take a look at the email field and see an email format, so they know that that's the format that's expected inside of that field. So let's format this and add this to the bottom of our page. So here's an HR and here's an H2, and let's call this form. And now we could grab this whole thing, cut it and paste it to the bottom of our page, and we could clean this up a bit.